Setting, the beach at night. Light pollution, minimal. A faint breeze whispers of things unseen over the fuzzy buzz of breaking surf. The ocean is dark, but the sky is full of stars. And one must wonder what strange fish navigate the cosmos. Enter the Ghoti. This archetype of bizarre spacefaring sea creatures has traveled from the most distant, deepest depths for the sole purpose of synchro summoning during your opponent's turn to gain advantage while interrupting plays. But maybe they could have saved themselves the trip, because despite their trickiness and explosive resolutions, the Ghoti never really managed to infiltrate the competitive TCG scene. Everyone strap on an O2 tank because, be it underwater or outer space, we're going where there's no air. Now let's dive in. The Ghoti are comprised of a line of main deck monsters, synchros in the extra deck, a few traps, and a field spell. Their big idea is to strategically banish your own monsters, gaining access to their floating and return effects from the banish zone. Because of this, Ghoti decks can be tricky to pin down. Obviously, there are still strategic ways to best with a Ghoti player using hand traps and the like, but Ghoti strats do enjoy a technical obliqueness where the inventive timing and locations of their effects do afford some protection once they get started. We'll be going over situations where this works and scenarios where it doesn't, but for now, this is one of the strengths that the archetype has going for it. They're weird, and that helps. After a turn of setup, many of your Ghoti monsters will be able to special summon themselves from the banner zone during your opponent's standby phase. And most of these core cards being level 2 tuners with the ability to synchro summon a fish using cards you control as a quick effect. This can let you dodge your opponent's removal as cost for committing to the field stronger extra monsters like Ascan, the bicorned Ghoti, and even the dreaded Ghoti of the Deep Beyond. Where the Ghoti first falter is speed. They take time to set up, which means even if you can break your opponent's board before going second, winning is still going to be an uphill battle on turn 4 at the earliest. Ghoti do much of their board building reactively during your opponent's turn, which can be okay going first when you're more likely to accomplish critical setups, but gets a lot harder when your opponent has time to prepare. Many decks, most decks honestly, prefer to go first in Yu-Gi-Oh! But the Ghoti don't just prefer it, they really rely on it. And if you lose a dice roll, your best strategy is to immediately start praying to the starry fish in the sky that your opponent bricks hard. Still, Ghoti plays are pretty huge when they do go off. Ascan is super versatile, able to both banish cards and bring itself back to the field from the banishment zone, while also setting up your next turn's plays by banishing your other fish from the graveyard. Ghoti of the Deep Beyond has the wildly strong effect of banishing the entire field when it's synchro summoned during your opponent's turn. But despite their big plays, they're still getting a failed cards video. So let's take a closer look at their main deck lineup. The Ghoti main deck monsters come in 3 levels, with each level accomplishing a different role. As already discussed a little bit, the level 2s, Shif, Fairy the Ghoti, Paces, Light of the Ghoti, Zep, Ruby the Ghoti, and Kef, Merc of the Ghoti are able to special summon themselves from your banish zone during your opponent's standby phase, and can activate effects during the main phase. The level 6s, which are Snopios, Shade of the Ghoti, Enoch, Sentry of the Ghoti, and Syax, Moonlight of the Ghoti, can manipulate your banish zone for various effects, like searching and extending. With this broad overview, let's make like the TG and drill down some fish effects. We'll start with the one that isn't a level 2 or 6. Ixeep, Omen of the Ghoti, is a 1500 attack extender that can special summon itself from your hand when a fish is banished, and can reset a Ghoti trap from the graveyard or banish zone during the next standby phase after it is banished. We're getting this one out of the way because there are usually better level 4 extenders people use instead of Ixeep, like Minairuka and Silent Angler. On to the level 2s. Shif will be your go-to tuner in most cases. If you can only get one card in your graveyard, make it Shif, because Shif can banish itself from the graveyard as a cost to increase the attack of one of your fish by 500 until the end of the turn. The attack gain is basically pointless, especially since in an ideal situation you get to activate Shif's graveyard effect turn 1, but Shif being able to move itself to banishment, that's awesome, and can turn a single level 4 fish into a 1-card Ascan plus fish search. Paces, Light of the Ghoti, is your other main tuner that you're going to want in the banish zone. This can be accomplished through generic means or by its own effect. Unlike Shif, Paces doesn't mind being drawn, because it can banish itself from the field to summon a fish from your hand. If you have surplus fish, Paces can make great targets for cards we're going to talk about a little later, like Pierce Weiss Map and Buatunaful Princess. Zep is also a tuner, but unlike Shif and Paces, you don't want to banish her during your turn, because when Zep is banished during your opponent's turn instead, she'll immediately recur to the field and initiate a synchro summon. The Ghoti have ways of banishing directly from the deck, but Zep also isn't a totally dead draw. Snopios and Syax can banish her from your hand as part of their effects, and during your turn, Zep can even banish herself to banish another fish from grave. This self-banishing isn't the best, because she won't come back automatically. But Keef, Murker the Ghoti, can get her back on the field, so she's not totally out of the game. Actually, let's talk about Keef. It's the only level 2 Ghoti main deck that's not a tuner, but it does have Pace's and Shif's effect to return to the next standby phase after being banished. Additionally, when your opponent summons a monster, Keef can target one of your already banished level 6 or lower fish and special summon it by banishing itself and the monster your opponent just summoned. All of this alone would make Keef fantastic, and to top it off, Keef is fine to have in hand because it can special summon itself as long as there's another fish on the field. Okay, so with the 1 level 4 and the 4 level 2s covered, we're now going to go on to the bigger fish, the level 6s. Snopios, Shade of the Ghoti, is your most important high-level main deck fish. It has 2100 attack, which makes it decent on the battlefield, but where this shade really shines is in the banish zone and field manipulation. As a quick effect, you can banish 2 fish from your hand in their grave to special summon Snopios from your hand. This is great for unbreaking cards like Shif and Zep that you don't particularly want in your hand. When it's summoned to the field, Snopios can target a face-up card and make it so that when the card eventually leaves the field, it will go to banishment instead. You'll often be targeting Snopios with its own effect, because when Snopios is banished, it can banish another fish from the grave to return itself to the hand, getting you all set up to summon Snopios again on your next turn while readying your level 2s to swarm the next standby phase. You can use Snopios' effect offensively too, or on your own Ghoti of the Deep Beyond to help it stick around. But yeah, mostly you'll be self-targeting. Saïx, Moonlight of the Ghoti, has 2400 attack and can search a fish from deck when it's normal or special summon. After the search, you'll have to banish a fish from your hand or face-up field, but that's very okay, because often the card you're searching is one that you're going to want to banish, like Shif or Snopios. If Saïx is banished, you can banish another fish from hand, graveyard, or field to summon it back, which can trigger its search again. This makes Saïx an excellent graveyard target to banish for Snopios and other effects. We've saved Enoch, Sentry of the Ghoti, for last, because it's the one that never gets used. Like Snopios, it has 2100 attack, but unlike Snopios and Saïx, it doesn't have a good way to facilitate its own entrance onto the field. When Enoch is summoned, you can target a level 4 or lower banished fish and special summon in defense position with effects negated, which is a pretty good effect that's unfortunately hard to pull off. To do so reliably, you'll probably have to tribute, use Keef, or activate one of the Ghoti trap cards, which is probably the intention with Enoch, since it can banish a fish from hand or face-up field to search a Ghoti trap from the deck. While the Ghoti really don't see much usage, the Ghoti traps basically don't see any at all. They're left out of most Ghoti deck lists for reasons that we're going to get to, although they are going to be pretty familiar. Mostly they're just too slow. Let's actually get into the Ghoti support now. These fish have 3 traps and a field spell at their disposal, and we'll start with the field spell. The most distant, deepest depths has one of the coolest names in Yu-Gi-Oh! And a pretty alright effect to back it up. It has partial inherent protection, in that while you control a fish synchro monster, it can't be destroyed or banished by card effects. Its other effects can be used once per turn, and include both a search and recursion. The field spell can banish a fish from graveyard or hand to search a Ghoti monster from deck, and when a fish is summoned to your field, you can banish a fish you control to bring this card out of the graveyard and into your hand. This is pretty decent searchability, but even though it can in turn be searched by cards like Terraforming and Metaverse, it doesn't actually have Ghoti in its very cool name, which is a bit annoying. As for the traps, one of them is decently usable. If Ghoti Chain was a spell, it'd be awesome, but it's a trap, which just makes it harder to use. Still, it lets you banish a face-up fish you control to special summon a Ghoti with a different name from your hand, deck, graveyard, or banishment. The monster will be banished when it leaves the field, but that can be kind of the point too, depending on the card that you choose. If Ghoti Chain is used to summon Enoch, then you'll immediately be able to reset Ghoti Chain and maybe use Enoch's effect to fetch one of your low-level banished fish. While this sounds pretty good, you'll probably be better off just using Ghoti Chain to directly summon a more versatile monster, like Snopios, Saïx, or Keef. Ghoti Chain can only be activated once per turn, which means you're probably not going to run more than one. And then you might not even ever see it, especially if you're running generic starters like Lifeless Leaffish over Ixeep. Ghoti Fury is a continuous trap with a once per turn limit on each of its effects. The first thing Ghoti Fury can do is target a fish you control and a monster your opponent controls and banish both of them until the next standby phase. It's worth noting that if you target a monster like Oscon, Snopios, or Saïx, you won't have to wait until your next standby phase to get your monster back, which is nice. For its second effect, Ghoti Fury can banish itself from the graveyard or field when a fish is special summoned to your field while any card is banished. After this self-banish, all of your fish monsters will gain 100 attack for each banished card until the end of turn. Ghoti Fury is a little harder to use than Ghoti Chain, and if you're only got one spot for Ghoti Trap in your deck, Chain will get you further than Fury. But the Ghoti Trap with the biggest boom is Ghoti Cosmos. It's a normal trap that can apply 3 different effects in sequence based on the number of banished fish. If only a single fish is banished, Cosmos will protect all your other fish from being destroyed by battle this turn. Once you've got 4 or more banished fish, Ghoti Cosmos unlocks its second effect, which locks your opponent out of negating the activation of fish effects on your field this turn. Finally, when 8 or more fish occupy the banished zones, Ghoti Cosmos can spell summon a fish synchro monster from your extra deck and treat it as a synchro summon, in addition to the other effects. This means that a full power Ghoti Cosmos activation during your turn can summon a 4000 plus attack Ghoti of the Deep Beyond that cannot be negated as it banishes the board and comes back to the next standby phase. Ghoti Cosmos is a powerful but difficult to utilize card. If you're dedicating space to it, it's probably key to your win condition. But the biggest Ghoti players are its synchro monsters. The frantic banishments and summons of the smaller fish is all about bringing these vicious fish from the far end of the galaxy to your side of the field. So let's see what Mean Besties the most distant deepest beyond has to offer. Arionpas, Serpent of the Ghoti, is a level 6 fish synchro with 2100 attack and no defense. It has generic summon requirements and can banish a level 6 or lower fish from deck on synchro summon. This has immediate synergy with any Ghoti cards like Shif, Paces, Snopios, and like everyone else except Enoch. But the card most commonly banished by Arionpas is Zep. If Arionpas is summoned during your opponent's turn, which is easily doable with a recursive Twin Tuners, then you can use Arionpas' effect to banish Zep, who will immediately summon itself and let you synchro summon a level 8, using Arionpas as a material. This would already be good on its own, but it even gets better because Arionpas gets its other effects when it's sent to the graveyard as a synchro material. You can target a fish in your graveyard or banishment to add a fish of equal or lower level from your deck to your hand. This is a huge activation for Ghoti plays, and can be set up extremely easily with just one card. Arionpas usually doesn't lurk on the field for long, but Ghoti players will almost always want to run more than one copy because it's just so important. Your first choice when you're going into level 8 Ghoti is usually going to be Oskon the Bicorned Ghoti. This synchro fish has 2700 attack and the fantastic on-summon effect to banish itself and any one of your opponent's cards. From the banishment zone, Oskon's floating effect will then activate. It can banish another fish from grave to bring itself back to the field once per turn. Where this gets really cool and technical is that you can prevent your opponent from interrupting the Arionpas graveyard search with cards like Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring by chain blocking Arionpas' effect. After synchroing into Oskon using Arionpas during your opponent's turn, you can establish your chain with Arionpas at Chainlink 1 and Oskon as Chainlink 2. This means that resolving backwards, Oskon's banish will always occur immediately before Arionpas is leaving your opponent with no window to react, which is pretty neat. And once you've got Oskon on field, it's kind of hard to get rid of. It's a free 2700 attack body that can pretty much come back every turn as long as you've got Ghoti effects to activate. Your second choice of level 8 Ghoti, or let's be real, probably your fourth choice behind Oskon, is Goglim, Spear of the Ghoti. This synchro fish also has 2700 attack, but during the battle phase, it can banish a monster it engages at the start of the damage step. This is pretty good, but can only happen once per turn, meaning it'll be hard to defensively wall yourself with Goglim. But the Spear doesn't mind that. It wants to attack anyway, and then it wants you to banish itself during your opponent's standby phase to summon its synchro materials from the grave. While Goglim might be useful for playing around big monsters that are immune to targeting, you've almost always got better tools than one that can only resolve itself during the battle phase. If Oskon's target banish doesn't cut it, then you're usually better off just taking a big swing at summoning Ghoti of the Deep Beyond. And here we are at the end of the universe, and the furthest expanse of the most distant, deepest depths. Here we are at the end of time and space and matter with the godfish whose body is the contracting and expanding mega channels of vacuum and life and dust, Ghoti of the Deep Beyond. This level 10 synchro fish has question mark attack and 0 defense, with its attack value equaling the number of banished monsters times 500. As mentioned previously, when it's synchro summoned during your opponent's turn, Ghoti the Deep Beyond can banish the entire field. Then, later, during the next standby phase, after Ghoti the Deep Beyond is banished from a monster zone, it will return. The intended combo here is to clear a board full of monsters to power up Ghoti the Deep Beyond, while removing threats and maybe stocking your own banish zone. It's all pretty great when it goes off, but you'll have to be careful because Ghoti the Deep Beyond is a when effect and not an if effect, which means it can miss timing. One other cool thing is that since the field spell, the most distant deepest depths, cannot be destroyed or banished by card effects while there's a synchro fish on the field, it will be spared from Ghoti of the Deep Beyond's big banishing, which will help you rally resources to go for game in the subsequent turn. And if you can get this far in your Ghoti combos, you probably have a decent chance at winning. Unfortunately, getting to this point is often going to be a very difficult uphill battle, against the current, if you will. a fight you're just not going to win super consistently. While some decks are capable of building their board and attacking on a single turn, and others love to do so with a turn of setup, decks like Ghoti are in the frustrating space where they need a turn of setup to do the rest of their setup on the next turn before they're ready to attack. Because they need your opponent's turn to access their strongest effects, the Ghoti really struggle with going second. They pop off on turns 3 and 4, which means whether your opponent has a board full of negates or a hand well armed with going second cards, they'll be ready to counter the Ghoti. And there's even more to say about Dimension Shifter, which in theory would be an easy include for most Ghoti players. These fish like being banished, right? Then boom, Dimension Shifter. It should be a big boon against decks that struggle without their graveyard. But the trouble here is that Ghotis like to be banished as cost. If everything is going to be banished automatically, that really messes with the Ghoti's player's ability to maintain advantage by recycling vital cards like Snopios, Oscan, and Syx. While Dimension Shifter doesn't punish Ghoti as much as it does other decks, it's a pretty big L that the space fish who crave banishment are picky about how they get it. Another weakness of the Ghoti is their initial vulnerability. Although their banishing shenanigans can be difficult to chase once they get going, they lack a strong starting spell. The most distant, deepest depths can launch your plays if you have a hand that works with it, but it's no Branded Fusion, Prologue of the Destruction Swordsman, or Welcome Labyrinth. Instead, your combos rely on cards like Purywise Map and Lifeless Leaffish, which absolutely can be ashed or negated. Because of this, many Ghoti players supplement the archetype with generic fish and other synchro monsters. Purywise Map is a normal spell that lets you trade half your life points to grab a monster with 0 attack from your deck. Until the end of the turn, you can't activate the card's effects unless it's normal summon. But most of the time, you'll be grabbing either Pace's Line of the Ghoti, or more often, Be a Tuneful Princess, which are both good uses of your normal for the turn. Be a Tuneful Princess banishes herself on summon to summon a fish from deck, an effect you'll usually use to grab a lifeless leaf fish. This generic low-level fish can mill another fish from deck to grave on summon. Often, you'll be milling Shif, and then following up with Shif's graveyard effect targeting lifeless leaffish. This lets you use Arionpas and Oscan next turn at the cost of as little as 1 card, if that card is Purywise Map, Be a Tuneful Princess, or lifeless leaffish itself. If your opponent disrupts one, maybe you'll have another. Another useful turn 1 starting card is something like Golden Sarcophagus, which can banish Shif or Paces from deck and can't be negated with Ash Blossom. Or even better, cross out Designator, which can both counter hand traps or set up your banish zone during the end phase as a non-negatable cost. Duelists who are particularly concerned about enabling their synchro plays might opt to run Supai Dustwalker at 3 and Supai at 1, or Ascatter Dawnwalker at 3 and Fire Ant Ascatter at 1, or both. More options include Ice Jane Ran Agerine, which gives you an easy line to Ice Jane Grimir Agerine as another level 10 synchro water boss. Add in Hop Your Squadron to further your synchros during your opponent's turn. You can go bananas because you've already gone Ghoti, which means you have eyes for the big plays regardless of how unlikely they are. White Aura Whale is a good level 8 synchro fish that can situationally be more useful than Oscan. And Adamancipator Risen Dragite is another good level 8 to summon during your turn, or with Hop Your Squadron that can give you a spell at Trap Negate. Before Baronne du Fleur was banned, there was a strong case for Excel Synchro Stardust Dragon as well. There's still utility there as another line to Ice Jade Gambir Agerine, but after 1 or 2 interruptions, you'll probably still find yourself doing what many other fish decks do. Swarm the field to go into Xyz monsters. Abyss Shark is a good extender here, as you can use it to search out Silent Angler for further plays, or Lifeless Leaffish if you haven't used your normal summon yet. And then it's a good body for going into monsters, like number 4 Sea Stealth Kraken, or Bahamut Shark. You might also work in Marincess Coral Anemone and Abyss Keeper in case you wind up with a field full of mismatched bodies. It's nothing that gives them a competitive edge, but there are a lot of fun stuff going on with Ghoti names. Just like the archetype itself, Ghoti can be pronounced as fish. It's a creative respelling where the GH is read like the G from enough. The O is read like the O from woman, and the TI is read like the TI from tarnation. Together, these readings make the word that's spelled Ghoti, which sounds like fish. But the names of these strange space fish get even more cryptic. Most of the Ghoti have names that are word puzzles of oceanic words from various languages. This doesn't apply to Ghoti the Beyond, but take Shif, Fairy the Ghoti for example. It can be arranged to become Fish, Fairy of the Ghoti, which is another way of saying Fish, Fairy of the Fish. Similar, Paces, Light of the Ghoti is Pisces, the Latin word for fishes, and the astrological sign. We're going to loop back to Paces, but first let's check out the other Ghoti anagrams. Enoch, Sentry of the Ghoti, is a mixed up ocean. Arionpas, Serpent of the Ghoti, comes from the word opsarion, the Koine Greek word for fish. pez, a Spanish word for fish, is what gives us Zep, Ruby of the Ghoti. The name of Ascon, the bicorn Ghoti, can be turned into sakana, fish in Japanese. Pixie, the Portuguese word for fish, can be used to mix up Ixeep, Omen of the Ghoti. And finally, Goglim, Spear of the Ghoti, connects with the Korean word for fish, mulgogi. But it's not actually finally, because there are 2 more Ghoti word puzzles. Well, kind of 2 more. Narratively, Keef, Merc of the Ghoti, and Cyax, Moonlight of the Ghoti, are part of the same entity. The name Cyax corresponds with Pisces, a singular Latin word for one fish, as opposed to Paces/Pisces referring to multiple. Keef is not an ocean word at all, but rather an anagram of the word fake. This is because Keef isn't actually a real fish. It's a lure. This becomes clear by comparing the artwork of Keef, Merc of the Ghoti, and Cyax, Moonlight of the Ghoti, the latter of which is an anglerfish, a deep-sea predator that fishes for other fish with a glowing antenna on its head before snapping up curious approachers with needle-sharp teeth. Look in the Merc behind Keef's artwork to find the looming visage of Cyax waiting to get you. Keef's effect plays into this narrative too. When opponent's monsters summon into Keef's proximity, both little fish and enemy are swept into the banish zone as the creature lurking behind Keef strikes. So, the Ghoti didn't make the biggest splash in the competitive scene, but so what? They're cool and have highly technical playstyles. Yes, they flail like a level 14 Magikarp against most meta threats, but being a failure is a relative state. Not every card printed will occupy a tier pedestal, and can still be fun to play. And the Ghoti are always out there, lurking. The cosmos holds many secrets, and maybe the right cards from distant stars will reveal the Ghoti have been at the top of the food chain all along, and everyone who underestimates them is just another hapless morsel taken in by a fake Keef, unaware of the starry fangs closing around us until it's too late.